Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Macy's Parade in Pop Culture. We have done our song, we have done our 5 television series episodes, and now it is time for our 4 movies. And today we are going into a black and white classic. And yes, I am talking about the 1984 Woody Allen film Broadway Danny Rose. You thought it was the obvious one, but I think you already know based on what you just see right now with the title and the thumbnail. So, Broadway Danny Rose was released all the way back in the beginning of 1984 on January 27th. It had a budget of $8 million and grossed $10 million worldwide. It was screened out of competition at the 1984 Cannes Film Festival after the movie was released. The film also stars Woody Allen and Mia Farrow, and it did receive a couple of mainly a couple of awards, winning a BAFTA for Best Original Screenplay, a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actress in a Musical or Comedy for Mia Farrow, a Writers Guild Award win for Best Original Screenplay, and 2 Oscar nominations for Original Screenplay and Director, all, of course, for the writing and directing to Woody Allen. Now, Woody Allen has been a notable filmmaker throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s until his sexual harassment Me Too allegations came in. Basically, no one in any English territory countries wants to work with him anymore. Even though he's still somewhat making movies today, it's just people in the English territory countries, especially in the United States, don't want to work with him anymore. I actually have seen 3 of Woody Allen's films prior to Broadway Danny Rose. I saw his 2011's film Midnight in Paris, which did won him his final Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. This unique time-traveling movie around Paris, France. A very heartwarming comedic film. Really loved it. Then his 2013 film Blue Jasmine, which got a Best Actress win for Cate Blanchett. Not really a movie I'm not really think of. Not really a big fan of that. And then his 2005 film Matchpoint. And that was actually a really great suspense film, like really more like an affair film specifically. But it was really well done, really well scripted and well casted. I really liked Matchpoint so much. I still don't know when I can get a good American Blu-ray for the film. I have Midnight in Paris, but not Matchpoint. So this is actually my 3rd film, and my first one in this specific, like, in the 20th century. Like, basically, I've only seen 3 of his films in the 21st century. I've not seen, like, Hannah and Her Sisters, or Deconstructing Harry, or most notably, of course, Annie Hall, which won Best Motion Picture of the Oscars in 1977 over Star Wars, might I add. Now, let's talk about what Broadway Danny Rose is. Now, the first thing you might want to know when you're entering into this film is that there is a narration going on through, well, not really a narration, I would say, but more specifically, the stories being told by actual real-life comedians that are all at this restaurant having a lunch in together and talking about a unique story about Danny Rose, a theatrical agent who had a massive, has a lot of unique talents that he has had. But one talent that has been trying to get the biggest momentum is Lou Cavanola, a singer who's been getting the rising momentum. Now, there is supposed to be a big, massive thing for him to have, like a specific concert to get actually big major celebrities to attend this to see if he can try to make a comeback in the entertainment industry a bit. And the only way for him to really do this is to get his wife, Tina Velletti, to the show, which, although they are technically married, they're kind of separated a bit. So Danny had to do, so Danny had the mission to go and get Tina, since Lou would be a little bit afraid because Tina might be mad at him for a potentially that she might, like a serious sour relationship they might have had. And Danny had to try to convince her to try to do so, even at the point of chasing her to almost like a big, I don't know what, I wouldn't say like a mafia thing, but like almost like a bounty hunter Italian mobster type of deal where the main husband or like honcho male it was supposed to be in love with Tina, but obviously Tina doesn't even love him, and obviously the main male, like the kind of supposed like lover to Tina, thinks that Danny is actually Tina's new boyfriend, and so his brothers have decided to probably hunt them down. So it's basically a massive chase to get from point A to point B to get to Lou before things go chaotic. There is something I also would like to mention about this that, as I've stated, this is my fourth Woody Allen movie, and I know Woody Allen actually had starred a lot of his own movies in like in some of his earlier films, like he did like in Annie Hall and in this film. So it is interesting to see him as a performer. I actually have seen a performance from him in another movie, which was DreamWorks' first film, Ants, DreamWorks Animation specifically, but I never seen him act in one of his own movies. And I can see, like, it almost feels like that Allen is basically like directing himself, like he is directing the entire, like the director is basically in the movie because he's basically playing a theatrical manager and just almost just trying to tell like these actors to do all these things all at once. So he's basically like brings himself into the motion picture, but just under a different character. While the movie was kind of going, I almost felt like I was getting a little bit of comparison to a movie that would be released a few years later after Broadway Danny Rose, somewhere in another film in the 80s called Something Wild, directed by Jonathan Demme, starring Jeff Daniels and I think it's Melanie Griffith, I believe. Which I almost feel like because there is a bit of a scenario where somebody is on the way to chase both of them down or something like that. I think it's a little bit different than I thought it was, but that's more of the climax. But this is more like I've seen like this typical. I might have seen like this somewhat story before where there's some sort of mafia that chases the innocent man and the woman that actually belongs to something about this relations to this family or what. And it is kind of more of not the main purpose of the film because it doesn't really happen until like I think almost over an hour or something, or like around, because the movie is only an hour and 20 minutes, so it's like around, I would say, the 50 mark. It's like the beginning of the second act of the film because the entire first act is just getting the whole situation of funding this big comeback for Lou, and then and Danny has to go and get his wife. Now I will like to say that I think I kind of was not really interested much at the very beginning because I was like, it didn't really even explain, like I didn't even, like it was kind of a bit of a slower pace at the beginning because it just took a while for us to get the main aspect of the film of Danny meeting Tina so that she can obviously go and get him. Even our first scene when we meet her, she just like is so outrageous, and we know that her husband is still calling her and she's just saying no, 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 no. It's just like, wow, that's just all in one scene. And I think if I remember, that was all in a one take, I believe. I'm not sure because I know there are some minor edits, but it is kind of, well, a lot of questioning, I would say. It's been over about a day since I seen the film. One thing I would say, I would say the best thing about the movie is without a doubt the cinematography, all done in this black and white scenario, even though the movie is set in the early 80s. I just think it feels perfect in the black and white. If it wasn't color, I think it might have not have worked, because it's just like, this is something you would have seen, like this movie being out like somewhere in the 50s or the 60s specifically. Even though this is a comedy, I just never really laughed at the film. I think there was only one joke I can understand where it's going for. It almost feels like, even though it's not intentional, it almost feels like a sexual joke because, like with Tina, just like with her face basically. It's like right at the beginning of the climax when, I won't go into detail, but it is like it's part of the main conflict that the two have to face. One of the posters, and I think the poster in the that I'm showing the video, probably basically explains what it might be, even though it's not really. But there is one joke that is really the best one, and that's where this aspect comes in with the Macy, somewhat not really, I don't think a real life, but I think it's like just a movie set version of the Macy's Parade warehouse. So this is where we get into the Macy's Parade discussion. There is a scene where, right at the beginning of the climax, where Danny and Tina have to run away from some sort of hunter, like bounty hunter specifically, to prevent them from being killed because they are running away from obviously the area where they were stuck at, and they end up in this not so fantastic warehouse, I would say. It doesn't really look like a warehouse because obviously, as you know, the Parade Studio, I think this was in the 80s, and I think this was during when Goodyear was still around involvement, but I'm not really sure. But the warehouse just doesn't look that great, I will be honest. And why did they have the underdog balloon fully filled up with helium? Or like that's just kind of wasteful, honestly. And like then you see like some of the clown statuettes and the Pilgrim Man and Pilgrim Woman. But the one scene that is the most hilarious is that the bounty hunter tries to shoot Danny and Tina, but accidentally shoots the helium tank, and you just hear both Danny, Tina, and the hunter just speaking through the helium, and it's just hilarious. It's just like it's not the chipmunk one that you would think. It's just more of a different way they did it, how they portrayed the helium, and I think it's just so hilarious how they did that. And I think that was definitely the best joke of the entire movie, just their conversation in that helium way. It's just perfect. That is not the only other Macy's Parade aspect that is in the movie. The other one is, of course, the parade itself appearing a bit of like almost the beginning of what I would say the epilogue of the film. And that is Tina with another man. Specifically, they ran into this guy that was filming a commercial when they were trying to escape from the bounty hunters. And she was dating him, and they were watching what is to be the 1982 Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. So I don't know if this actually was filmed in, like, they filmed that scene in that year's parade, like, specifically filming the movie during when the parade was going on that year. And as many of you know, the 1982 parade was one of the last 80s through 2000s Macy's parades that had to get up on YouTube specifically. It took a while for the 1982 parade to be found, and it finally came through. Of course, that was the year that both Olive Oil and Woody Woodpecker made their debuts as giant balloons. And there are a lot of notable celebrities that did appear in that year's parade that you do see in the movie. Most notably, Sammy Davis Jr. was one of the most notable ones in that. And then you have a lot of other ones of some other famous balloons like Snoopy, Linus the Lionhearted, Underdog, Kermit the Frog. And it's just like, it's more of like the narration begins with that, and then it kind of goes where they're kind of having a little bit of relationship, because the last scene does take place on Thanksgiving Day specifically, where Tina and Danny meet one more time. Specifically, Tina went to Danny's house when Danny and all of his performers were having a frozen turkey Thanksgiving dinner. Yep, a frozen turkey meal they were having. It doesn't really have much to do with the film's connection itself, other than the two major scenes it has. One that kind of is somewhat of a breakup scene, but one is more important, even though the warehouse, I don't think that's not an actual warehouse they use. I think that was just more of the set for the film. And I don't even know if they were special effects or not. I don't know if they were green screen or not, specifically like with them at the parade route. And then of course I don't know how they actually, like, I feel like it almost feels like it's fake, but I'm not really sure. But keep in mind, visual effects are a little bit different than they were, like, in today's standards than it is in the 80s specifically. If you're going for practical ones, to be precise. I would say if there is one major criticism, I think probably is the one I'm not really the big fan of, is the narration of all these comedians having this dine-in together. If I'm correct, all the comedians that are probably in that scene are, yeah, I have the list here. I'm not sure if they're all of them or not, but there are a lot of celebrities that do play themselves here. You have Sandy Barron, Corbett Monica, Jackie Gailey, Morty Gunty, Will Jordan, Howard Storm, Jack Rowlands, Milton Berle, probably the most notable real life celebrity in this, Howard Cosell, and Joe Franklin. But I think the ones based on the cast list from Sandy through Howard I mentioned, I think they were all in the table, unless there are some that I don't know. But it just, like, it kind of goes back to them a couple of times in the film of having that conversation of all telling that story, and it just doesn't work, honestly. That, and I do feel like Danny kind of being a little bit too of a, almost like some sort of religious figure, like he's Jewish actually, and supposedly his Hebrew beliefs, and just it's just kind of odd. Even that fortune teller that Tina has to visit is also I completely forgot about that. So I'm just mentioning now, but it's okay. I would say this movie is fine. I prefer it over Blue Jasmine, but I don't think it's not on the levels I would say of like that I have seen like his future films like Midnight in Paris or Match Point. Even though I've yet to see films like Annie Hall or Hannah and Her Sisters yet. The movie is rated PG, so it is kind of a fine movie. I think it's somewhat of an okay movie to watch if you watch, but I think it really depends on. I don't think there's not any swearing. I just think it's almost like the arguments going on, and also, obviously with the weapons that are in the film, of course, that kind of really is probably maybe another reason, and that it was kind of a fine. And also I think it probably took a while for me to finish the film because the only way I watched the movie was through Pluto TV, and Pluto TV of course comes with a lot of ads when you watch a film, so that's not good. But that would do it for it. I wouldn't come back to this except maybe that one scene with the helium, or just seeing what the 1982 parade looks like in black and white, but I think that will do it for it. So the next time we go into our next film, it's the only animated one on this one, and the only one of the four movies that actually did have a connection with the parade, other than the obvious one that actually had a balloon in the parade to promote the film.